Welcome to Conversations with My Real Friends. On this episode, I'm going to talk about what's going on in real estate. In particular, the Department of Justice and the actions they're taking against real estate agencies, specifically trade associations, relative to their customs and practices. Want to learn more? Watch on. What happened? Right? This wasn't planned. So that's where I'm getting a lot of questions. I've been talking about this a lot. A lot of people are angry at me. Like it's my fault that this happened. I get a lot of angry comments from people when I start talking about this topic. Nobody's excited about this change. The consumers aren't excited about this any more than we are as professionals. This wasn't a planned thing, right? The trade association didn't go out trying to change how commissions are paid. They set up the system that exists and have been fostering it for decades, right? So this was not their plan. The problem is they got sued and they had no choice because of the way the lawsuit went and because they lost. An adjustment was their only option. It was their only way to survive. And so the survival option they've taken is not being well received. And I totally get that. The reality is this goes to some fundamental issues about our society and how we talk about contracts, how we talk about rights and what people are entitled to and not entitled to, right? The plaintiffs in the lawsuit, the NAR lawsuit, signed listing agreements and agreed to pay commissions. They signed contracts and then they said, yes, I signed a contract, but I shouldn't have had to pay it. That's what happened. And they won on that argument, right? So just understand that's the society and the mindset of our populace today. These concepts of it's not fair. I am entitled to things. It doesn't matter what I signed. I hear this all the time, right? I'm an attorney. I fight over contracts. And then someone as a defendant's like, well, I didn't read the contract, so I'm not bound by it. I'm like, well, what? And the problem is the courts sometimes agree, right? So that's the world we're in. So in a world where what we thought, for those of us who are older, right, what we thought was solid contracts are not solid anymore. And so we're having to look at and talk about and make different decisions. NAR had no choice but to settle and try and figure out how to move forward with this. How they're doing it and what they're doing is going to be very interesting. Do we need to lift it up? Do we need to put it, Anna?
No, we're good.
We're good?
It's
Okay.
good now.
I want to make sure you guys get a good view, not my stomach, online. So, but just so that's the framework of what we're talking about. No one wanted this to happen. And the result is that the settlement and what's going on is coming off really clunky, right? It's not coming off as planned. And little pieces, it's like pieces are falling off the car, right? And you're trying to figure out how to put them back on the car. A car is a great reference considering California Association of Realtors, right? Like, so we got this car, right? And pieces are falling off and we're trying to figure out how to put them back on, right? CAR had 65 forms that were either new forms or were going to change that came out today, right? They pulled back 21 of the forms last week and did not release 21 of the forms that were supposed to come out today. Why? Because the Department of Justice said, we don't like your new forms. So that's the world we're in, where we're still trying to work through this. The settlement, like we all know, or we're going to talk about the terms of the settlement. Everybody's like, oh, well, it's settled. It's not settled. The court has not affirmed the settlement yet. The settlement may not end up looking like we think it's going to look, right? So everybody's asking me about August 17th, right? So the National Association of Realtors, at their last board meeting, they do board meetings a couple times a year, they made significant changes to the MLS rules. Those rules are supposed to go into effect August 17th. Today, they sent an email saying, remember, these are coming out August 17th. My crystal ball says those changes will not happen on August 17th because the settlement, that date was set based upon the day that based upon the timing of when the court settlement was supposed to be finalized. The date for the settlement has been kicked to November. So I will be shocked if they actually implement those forms changes, the MLS rules changes in August, because the settlement won't be done by then, okay? But just like I'm a member, I have my broker's license, I'm a member of CAR, I'm a member of NAR, and I believe in these trade associations. I do believe they're trying to do the right thing, but their communication and their handling of this has been a horrendous. And this is just one more piece, is they're not talking to their constituency properly about what's going on. The day they lost the settlement, they came out and said, we're going to fight this. The day they lost the lawsuit, they came out, we're going to fight this. You know, it's wrong, right? They had no choice but to settle that case. As soon as that case and a $1.8 billion judgment was issued against them, there was no not settling that case. The next day, over 100 lawsuits were filed throughout the country. Just the legal fees would have made them go bankrupt. There was no not settling that case. But they told you they were going to fight. And in the back room, they're settling the case, right? So the communication is a real problem, because then they announced the settlement and people are like, what are you talking about? You told us you're going to fight for us, and then you go and settle it behind our back, right? So they need a better press secretary, right? They need better communication to help people understand what's going on, because they are trying to do the right thing, but they're not explaining it and talking about it in the right way, right? And you guys are going to be in the same boat, right? As real estate agents, you guys are going to need to be talking to people and being honest and forthright and upfront. The more that you're trying to hide things, the less successful you're going to be as well. And honestly, that's what got us into this mess, was not properly talking about compensation, okay? So now I'll step off my soapbox and we'll actually talk about kind of what's happening, right? So the first thing that happened and how this all started was that the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, all right? So this is the federal government, Department of Justice. They are in charge of enforcing our antitrust laws. They accuse the National Association of Realtors of a crime. Understand, this is criminal law. They accuse them of criminal behavior as it related to how commissions are paid, right? They said that the way that commissions are shared and how real estate agents were talking about it was a violation of the antitrust laws and criminal. So understand, that's the level we're talking about. That accusation was funneled into a settlement, right? So the Department of Justice files the lawsuit. On the same day, they filed a settlement with the National Association of Realtors. So the way lawsuits work, as a lawyer, will get you behind the curtain, right? Like, so people start arguing and fighting about things, and we talk, right? The attorneys are talking and sending papers back and forth, and we try to settle it, if we're good attorneys, before we're in court, right? The goal is to resolve it before you're in a court situation where our costs and all of the publicity start to blow things up, right? So that's exactly what happened. DOJ said, we think you're doing some stuff wrong. NAR said, what do you think we're doing wrong? And they said, well, this is what we think we're doing wrong. And they said, well, if we change this, would that help? And they said, yeah, well, you can change that, and maybe you can change this, right? And so they negotiated this deal of, you're laughing at me, but it's true, right? It's exactly what happens, right? So they worked through it and they came to a deal, all right? So the day they filed the lawsuit, they also filed the settlement. And this settlement did go into effect. Right? So this is 2020 we're talking about, right? So we're gonna walk through time as we go through this. There were 4 things that NAR and the DOJ agreed to. The first was that realtors cannot represent to consumers that they're free. This goes to buyers agents telling buyers they're free. They're not free. The buyer may not be paying them, but they're getting paid, right? And that conversation about compensation and not representing the facts about them being compensated was a problem. And that was one of the accusations by the Department of Justice, that it's a violation of law, okay? So that was the first thing. So when this settlement came into effect, this was in 2021 that the settlement went into effect, they changed the ethics rules for NAR, right? So this ethics rule changed relative to this. The second thing they changed is that the compensation being offered to the buyer's agent had to be made public. It used to be that it was on the MLS, but it was behind the wall, right? So if you were an agent, you could see it on the MLS, but the public didn't know how much the seller was offering as cooperating compensation. So that changed a few years ago. So now if you go onto realtor.com or Zillow or anybody that buys the IDX data, you'll see the cooperating commission. That happened because of this settlement. That's why that happened, okay? The third thing that they changed was that realtors can no longer search the MLS for cooperating commission in their search of trying to find a home for a buyer, right? So agents would go in and say, I want to make 2.5%. So I'm only going to show houses that are offering 2.5%. That's a problem, right? That's called self-dealing, right? We're not doing our fiduciary duty. We're not representing properly the consumer, right? And because of the compensation rules, there was an incentive to do this, right? So they made it a rule. So if you go in the MLS, you can't search for a cooperating commission. So, all right, fine. The reality is that realtors didn't stop knowing how to read. They can still tell the difference between a 2 and a 3 and decide whether to show a property or not, right? I mean, I'm not coming up with a crazy idea that there are still agents who only show properties that offer a certain percentage. It's true, right? Oh, it's a whole thing, right? It shouldn't be, but it is. So that's one of the issues. And that's why we are being accused of bad behavior, of self-dealing, of violating the law, right? And then the fourth one was allowing non-realtors, right? So realtors, that term is a trade name, right? So people who are realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors. So I have my broker's license, right? So I'm a licensee, and I happen to be a member of the trade, but I'm not a member of the MLS because I don't sell property. So technically I'm not a realtor, but whatever. Anyways, if you're not a realtor, right? If you're not a realtor, you were not allowed to access the lockboxes on properties. But any licensee should be able to access the lockboxes, right? The trade limiting the availability of access was self-dealing, right? And so allowing for access to the properties. So for most residential real estate agents, they're members, but think about commercial. Most commercial agents are not members of the Board of Realtors, right? And so they don't need to be, but they wouldn't then be able to access properties through the lockboxes. So those rules changed. So now any licensee can access the property unless there's actually a CAR form. There's a CAR form for everything, right? There's a CAR form that the seller can say, I only want licensees to have access. I only want realtors to have access to the lockbox. If the seller makes that choice, it's fine, right? The seller is making an informed decision, but otherwise any licensee has to be given access to the lockboxes. If you're a seller, do you care? I'm just, in my opinion, I think the seller wants as many people showing their house as possible, right? Don't you agree?
Not necessarily. Some of them won't even allow us to have a lockbox for ourselves.
Well, but that's like the ones who don't want lockboxes, they don't want anybody to have them, right? If they're comfortable with a lockbox, they want everybody to have them.
So the lockboxes that we now have with the keypads and stuff
Yep.
for using our phone.
Yep. They get a one-time access code. So what'll happen is,
Okay.
yep, that's how it works, right? So if someone wants to access it, they send a message through the system, they get a one-time access code to open that particular house, okay? Look, showing time and those things, you can get a computer to open the damn door for you now, right? You don't even need a person, right? It's pretty crazy. Then look, you think they don't want people, then they'll let a computer open the door, right? Like, it's pretty crazy, some of the stuff that is out there. But so this was the settlement, all right? This is what was agreed to between the DOJ and the National Association of Realtors. This settlement and this case put into the mind of civil attorneys like me the idea that there's some money here, right? Because our US system of law favors attorneys who file class action lawsuits, right? The whole concept of our whole legal system is set up to support class action lawsuits, to protect consumers. That's the mindset. So civil lawyers see this and they say, oh, this is an opportunity. The realtors are screwing up. We see a bucket of money here, right? So the Missouri case was triggered by this, but it's not the same case, right? This is a federal criminal case. The Missouri case is a civil case, right? So we get the settlement, NAR does their part, and then the DOJ says, you know what? We don't think we did a good job. We don't think we negotiated this settlement very well. Remember how I talked about contracts aren't as firm as they used to be? So the DOJ says, we're going to withdraw from the deal. We're backing out. We think we want more. What happened between 2020 and 2021? Do you know? 2020, COVID was already going. What happened? There was an election. We had a change of administration, which meant the people at the DOJ changed. So a conservative Republican administration is going to favor business. A Democratic consumer-facing administration is going to favor consumers. So their position, right? The Biden people come in, they take the position that this didn't go far enough to protect consumers, and they want more for consumers. That's what changed. And so they withdrew from the settlement. NAR said, wait, we had a contract, we had a deal. And so they went to court and they filed a case in the federal court in the same case, right? They filed a motion to say the DOJ has to abide by the settlement. Our legal system doesn't move that fast, right? So this is July of 2021, January of 2023, right? The trial court agrees with NAR, right? They say the DOJ is bound, the settlement's good, DOJ, you're out of luck, you can't withdraw. So one of the other big things about the law is nothing is ever final. The DOJ appeals the trial court's decision, right? So the DOJ appeals, and in April 5th of this year, the trial court agrees with the DOJ and throws out the settlement, right? This happened after the civil lawsuit and the civil settlement. So now the DOJ is back in play, and not only are they negotiating with the National Association of Realtors, they are negotiating with the California Association of Realtors, and they just interfered with all of our new forms. So, and they have free license because the court said they can do it now. So again, what the settlement says when the DOJ is done with us is going to look different, okay? And we still don't know, right? We still don't know exactly what this is going to look like. CAR doesn't know, right? They withdrew the forms because the DOJ was asking questions, so they don't know when they're going to release them because they responded to the DOJ, but they don't know if the DOJ is going to respond back or not. So they don't even know whether the DOJ is going to bless their forms or not.
Are there forms out?
There are drafts, but
there's no forms in the car. Okay.
No.
Good, because you were scaring me. I thought there was something.
There were 21 forms that were supposed to go live
Okay.
this week that CAR pulled back. All of the forms relative to compensation have been pulled back. But you know how CAR, when they release forms, they put out the drafts?
Yes.
So I have the red lines of all of the forms, but they're not released, right? And the clean ones have not come out.
So you can go on CAR and look at them.
They're gone. They took them off.
They took them off.
I caught them like in that little window when they were there, right? And so things like the new listing agreement has a grid like the RPA does, right? That's not out now, right? But so we really don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. This is the announcement, June 20th, right? So understand, I was updating this presentation last night. Things are moving so quickly, right? So last week, a week ago, the CAR's like, oh yeah, by the way, the forms that are supposed to come out on the 25th, 21 of them we're holding off because of the DOJ, okay? So we don't know exactly what things are going to look like.